9th business meeting of Waynesboro City Council. I'd like to welcome everyone tonight, and a special welcome to our two newly elected council members, Mr. Lee and Mr. Wood. Unfortunately, Mr. Lee couldn't be here tonight due to a family emergency, and Mr. Short is at home recovering from a virus and will also not be here tonight. For those in attendance this evening, if you wish to speak during the public comment hearing or the citizen comment period, please sign up on the sheet in the back of chambers. And Mr. Allen, could you lead us in the pledge?
Yes. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Item 3 is adoption of the meeting agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make that motion. I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Wood and Mr. Allen. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes 3-0. Item 4 is matters from mayor. I have 2 items of recognition tonight, but before I get to those, I don't want to fail to mention that Council has been made aware of an incident at the Y, and City Council is certainly anti-hate, and we want all citizens to know that we want to foster a community where citizens feel safe and respected. We will continue to follow the investigation of the incident and comment and act appropriately as more is known. Next, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank those city employees who work through the holidays. There are a number of services that are provided 24/7 or require extensive on-call support. Over the recent Christmas holiday, the extremely cold temperatures led to some emergency utility repairs and road salting. On behalf of the council, I'm extending our appreciation to those employees in Public Works Department that responded to the water main and line breaks, sewer overflows, and attended to our streets. Next, I would like to also make a note that today is National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day and offer a special word of gratitude to our police and sheriff department. Next, item 5 is matters from council. Does anybody have anything?
Nope. I just want to echo what you said about the incident at the Y. There's no place for that in their time, none whatsoever, and also always being a big supporter of law enforcement. They deserve more than just one day, so every day should be Law Enforcement Day.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wood. Okay, item 6 is consideration of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. And do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 3-0. Item 7 is to hold a public hearing and consider introducing an ordinance amending the City Code, Chapter 98, zoning to a new primary use for temporary special events permitted by conditional use in all zoning districts. I'd like to call on Leslie Tate, who is the Director of Community Development.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. The first public hearing this evening is for a zoning text amendment to add temporary special events by conditional use permit within the zoning ordinance. So the current code does not have a mechanism or use category for the type of events covered under our proposed definition of temporary special events. The applicant of the text amendment runs an existing bed and breakfast, Hermitage Hills, and would like the ability to have events such as weddings, workshops, seminars, etc. to supplement the existing business. So what types of events does the ordinance already cover? We do have section 98-4.7.6, and it allows for temporary outdoor events, but it stipulates that there is only one event permitted within a 6-month period and is really designed for larger scale events. The ordinance notes festivals, fairs, carnivals. So these types of events are more infrequent than what is envisioned with this proposed use category at only 2 events per year. So the new proposed use would only be permitted through a conditional use permit. So just to kind of clarify what that means, a conditional use permit means an applicant would have to apply to planning staff for the permit. There would be staff review and a staff recommendation. There would be 2 public hearings, one at the Planning Commission and one before council. And then if approved, conditions can be placed on the permit by council. So some examples of conditions could include things like a maximum number of guests, a maximum number of events per year. You could have outdoor music regulations. You could place buffer or landscaping conditions, and those are just to name a few. So I do want to note that tonight's public hearing is not to consider a conditional use permit at any given location. Tonight's public hearing is specifically the zoning text amendment to create the mechanism by which anyone could then come and apply for a conditional use permit. So you're not considering any location this evening, just adding the mechanism into the ordinance that would allow people to make an application. So when proposing a zoning text amendment, there are several parameters that the ordinance considers. So one is whether the amendment is consistent with good zoning practice, the public necessity, convenience, and general welfare. The third is the extent to which the proposed text amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And then the fourth one, and perhaps the most important in this instance, is the extent to which the proposed text amendment represents a new idea not considered in the existing ordinance or represents a revision necessitated by changing circumstances over time. So when the ordinance was adopted in 2011, these kind of special event facilities or smaller special events maybe wasn't as popular as we've seen it growing in the last several years, so that could be a reason it wasn't envisioned in that ordinance. And the others are whether or not there's some kind of error to amend, or whether you're making the ordinance applicable with state or federal statutes or case law. And while this is not specifically making our ordinance compliant with state code, it is supporting state code that has kind of created a lot more leeway for agritourism type activities and opportunities, of which, you know, we may see with this specific use. So the zoning text amendment would add temporary special events as a new use in the ordinance use table, and it would apply across all zoning districts. Again, it would only be permitted as a conditional use permit, and the reason for that is because the events could vary significantly in type, duration, size, and also the sites vary significantly across the city. It allows for the ability to evaluate each application according to the specific event type, the specific site characteristics, and it helps to ensure that events are really an asset to the community and to businesses and aren't adversely affecting surrounding properties, and allowing all attendees to safely participate. So how are we defining temporary special events? I am just going to read this because it is the purpose of the use. So the purpose of this section is to address temporary, small-scale special events that may occur at more frequent intervals and be of a smaller size than temporary outdoor events, of which I mentioned previously. Temporary special events are short-term events that may be held by nonprofit organizations or for-profit businesses multiple times a year. Events typically last 1 day or up to 3 days. Temporary special events can include, but aren't limited to, workshops, conferences, seminars, weddings, dinners, banquets, private parties, and other similar activities. This section establishes criteria for the approval or disapproval of such special events and provides the requirements for the conduct of those uses. And then it also notes that, you know, if you're interested in a larger scale, more infrequent event, that it applies under a different section of the code. So the requirements of a conditional use permit application would include that the applicant submit a concept plan, kind of showing the layout of the property and different uses or structures they propose. Parking and access information, they'd have to submit descriptions of the types of events with the number they would like to have per year, the approximate duration, estimated number of participants. They would include kind of their hours of operation. They would need to explain how water and sanitation facilities would be provided. They also would provide a description of if they plan to use temporary or permanent structures for the use. They would provide a safety plan, a lighting plan, and then in order to protect kind of adjacent property, any description of planned outdoor music. So if permanent structures are envisioned, they must be constructed according to all required zoning, building, and fire department permits. And then if they were to use any pre-existing structure that may have been permitted as a different use and try and convert it into an event facility, it would also have to obtain approvals to go under that use code. And then if temporary structures are envisioned, so you think of like kind of the large white tents that might be used for these events, they would be subject to applicable laws and regulations. The building code identifies temporary structures as those that are erected for 180 days or less, and they do require a building permit. In this ordinance, we're proposing that those would be prohibited in the front yard and that they would have to be 20 feet from rear and side property lines. And again, building permits would be required. The ordinance also addresses the way temporary facilities such as portable toilets or trash receptacles would be covered. It notes that they would have to be screened from view of adjacent parcels and streets, not placed in the front yard, and be set back from the side and rear, and then noting that they would need to be removed within 3 days of the end of the event. We did include a provision for some supplementary signage. So the signage for any kind of event, whether temporary or permanent, is permitted a maximum of 22 square feet and 8 feet in height. So in conclusion, the small-scale events, especially kind of as it relates to agritourism, really have become extremely popular over the last several years. Like I noted earlier, maybe the lack of popularity in 2011 was why they weren't potentially envisioned in the zoning ordinance at that time. Staff and the Planning Commission recommend approval of the zoning text amendment because it allows flexibility for the business owner and then also creates protections for adjacent property owners and the community and those participating in the events to participate safely. So that's all I have unless you have any questions, and then it is a public hearing for the zoning text amendment.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Ms. Tate? No. No? Okay. I hereby open the public hearing.
No one has signed up to speak. I might ask Ms. Tate, is the sponsor or the applicant present, and do they want to say?
Yes, the applicant is here if they would like to speak.
I don't know if I need.
You don't have to.
Did you have any questions?
Any questions?
No, I just wanted to check to make sure.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
All right. I hereby close the public hearing. Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance amending Chapter 98 to all temporary special events by conditional use permit in all zoning districts?
I'll introduce.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And thank you, Mr. Wood. Any discussion? Okay. This ordinance having been introduced and discussed will be considered at the January 23rd regular business meeting. Item 8 is to hold a public hearing and consider introducing an ordinance granting a conditional use permit modifying the Build 2 requirement in the Central Business District for property at the 222 South Wayne Avenue. Ms. Tate.
This request follows the process of a conditional use permit to modify the Build 2 line requirement in the Central Business Zoning District. Conditional use permits, like I've already said, allow for a case-by-case review. So in order to approve this request, council must find that the proposed use is consistent with good zoning practice and will not have an adverse effect on the health, safety, or comfort of persons living or working in the area, and will be no more detrimental or economically or otherwise to property or improvements in the surrounding area than when any use generally permitted in the district. The location of this request is on Wayne Avenue. It's the undeveloped lot between the Wells Fargo building and the bookkeeping and management building. It's directly across the street from Fishburne Military Academy. The property is zoned central business, and the applicant is requesting a modification of the Build 2 line requirement that's specifically within that district. Staff is currently reviewing a site plan for a construction of a new building on that vacant lot, and that's when the Build 2 line requirement was noted. So what is a Build 2 line? It is the location that's parallel to the property line to which the building facade must be built. So the intent is to create a consistent street wall and frame the street, creates an aesthetically pleasing place, and also provides development at a human walkable scale. The ordinance defines the Build 2 line as the front and street side property line to which a minimum percentage of the building facade along the front and street side, if any, must be built. So you'll note here in the ordinance, in the central business zoning district, the maximum and minimum front setback is 0. So that the maximum is 0. So in that case, the build-to line has to be at the property line, and the requirement is, without a modification, that 70% of the building facade would have to be built on the property line. So probably the easiest way to explain the purpose of a build-to line is through images. So a great example, obviously, is our main street between Church Street and Arch Avenue. You can see all of the buildings are constructed at the back of sidewalk. And obviously this is representative of a build-to line. So along Wayne Avenue, you see the arrows there. So the reason that staff and the Planning Commission support this proposed modification, which is allowable through the ordinance, is because the buildings that are already constructed on Wayne Avenue, and even those on either side of this vacant lot, are already set back farther than that required build-to line. So as you can see in these images, the proposed location of the new building would really just complement the setback of the existing buildings, making the request to modify that 70% build-to line requirement reasonable. This overlays the submitted site plan onto that lot and where they plan to construct the building, and so you can see how it is in keeping kind of with the already identified wall that exists there today. So staff and the Planning Commission recommend approval with the following condition, which is consistent with their already submitted site plan, and that condition is that the placement of any new structure at 222 South Wayne, tax map 45-2-21, shall complement the setback of the neighboring structures to ensure a consistent street wall. That's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Does anybody have any questions?
No.
Okay, no questions. Right.
And the applicant is here, but I don't know if they plan to
Okay.
speak or not.
Would the applicant like to speak?
She did a great job.
Okay. All right. I hereby open the public hearing, and do we have anyone?
No one has signed up to speak.
Okay.
yet.
I hereby close the public hearing. Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance granting the conditional use permit to modify the build-to requirement for Central Business District at 222 South Wayne Avenue?
I'll introduce that ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Do I have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Any discussion? Okay, this ordinance having been introduced and discussed will be considered at the January 23rd regular business meeting. Item number 9 is communication, correspondence, and calendar. Mr. Hamp.
I don't have anything this evening.
Thank you. That brings us to item number 10, that citizen comment period. I would like to remind speakers that you'll have 4 minutes to address council. We have a lighted timer here, and once that turns red, your time is up. And just please, for our records, if you could state your name and your address. Mr. Ham?
Dwight Williams.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of City Council. Dwight Williams is my name, 2818 Jefferson Lane here in Waynesboro. I simply like to just congratulate our 2 newest City Council members on joining City Council, and Jim Wood and Kenny Lee, who obviously is not here tonight. I've had a chance to talk with both of them, and I think they're going to be an outstanding contribution team to City Council. As someone who prides himself as being a part of this community politically, I try to develop a relationship with each city council member, mostly to try to do my best to help Waynesboro move forward, and so I look forward to continuing that tradition that I've started personally with all 5 of you. I think Waynesboro has a very bright future, and I think the 5 of you are going to lead Waynesboro into a future where she's going to be an economic powerhouse. So congratulations, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Do we have anyone else?
Yes, Ms. Shanda McGuffin.
Like you could have put the mic down. Come on, man. Good evening. I was a little late. I had the children tonight. Our first night with Rise on Mondays. And I usually try to make the first meeting to give y'all my laundry list. I will email this to you tonight, so you should have it in black and white. So congratulations to Vice Mayor, and congratulations to Kenny Lee on their race just recently. And Madam Mayor, I'm glad to see you right there. First thing, we need a black and brown business initiative and strategy. I know it's economic development's job. No, it's city council's responsibility to give direction and vision for the city. North Carolina is kicking our butts in this area. Lexington, Harrisonburg, Charlottesville, Roanoke, they have a black and brown small business initiative. And we need to model that. The Port Republic Road Comprehensive Plan has been accepted by the council, and there needs to be a timeline established to work on that plan. We know it can't happen overnight, but we need to see progress. Thank you for the basketball courts being put outside. The black community is excited about that. I have sent a message to Mr. Hamp, and I've also talked to Leslie about the signage, because the Historic Commission would like to use unused funds to help to fund that. My third thing, I'm back about the bridge on Florence Avenue, being named after Mrs. Augustine Bellamy. And I know that you all had whatever reasons it did not happen. We provided letters, emails, speakers came here for support of it. The bridge was not named anything else. No one else has brought up another name. And what's sad about it is I promised her children I was going to continue that fight. And 2 of them are now gone. So I have to bring it back up, because anytime I think of black history in this city, I think of Mrs. Bellamy. And she tirelessly gave to the city kids to teach them black history. And I would like you all, this council, to revisit that. Ohio Street needs to be paved. It's been skipped over because of the gas company's work. Well, the gas company has patched it up as much as they can patch it up. The road is horrible. And it's not on the road list because you keep blaming it on the gas company, keeps tearing the road up. But that street needs to be paid for the residential as well as for the business. We need someone to build a city website. That website is archaic. It is hard to find things on it. The website needs to be revamped. This is 2022, and we still have a website that looks like it's in the 80s. It needs to be fixed. Commissions and boards in the city need to be diverse. Look around at the different ones and see who sits on them, and if they are diverse. We must be intentional about having diverse commissions and boards so you have the heart of the city. I'm done. Thank you.
Perfect timing. Do we have anyone else?
No, ma'am.
Okay. That next item is a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I will second that motion.
All in favor? Say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.